Did you have to grow up too soon too? Were you the child who worried about your father? The child who learned to stay very quiet when your mother was angry? The child who tried to keep the peace, protect your siblings, or make life easier for everyone else? Maybe nobody ever said, take care of us, but somehow you knew, and now years later, you're still the strong one. The one who helps everyone, the one who feels guilty for resting, the one who struggles to say no, the one who carries other people's emotions as though they were your own. And perhaps you've spent your entire life believing, this is just who I am. But what if it isn't? What if many of the struggles you experience today began because you became the emotional adult long before you were ready? In this video, we're going to talk about the parentified child, how being forced to grow up too soon can shape us as adults, and some Bach Flower remedies that can gently help us release those old roles and finally come home to ourselves. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm a Bach Flower specialist and vibrational healer, and on this channel we explore emotional healing, personal growth, holistic healing, vibrational healing, and the deeper side of Bach Flower remedies. So if you enjoy this type of content, I would love to invite you to my free masterclass linked below, where I teach a completely different approach to using Bach Flower remedies and creating your own personalized starting formula to get yourself well on the way of healing. This is both for beginners as well as for people who already worked with Bach Flower remedies and even practitioners. Choose one of the 3 days and I'll be so glad to welcome you there. Now let's begin. So have you ever felt responsible for everyone's emotions? Like somehow, even as a child, it was your job to keep the peace, to sense the tension, to calm the room, to protect your mother, to manage your father, to watch your siblings, be good, be easy and strong. And now as an adult, you may look perfectly capable on the outside, but inside you are exhausted. Because a part of you is still living as the child who really learned, I am only safe when everyone else is okay. This is what we often call the parentified child, the child who was not allowed to simply be a child, the child who became the emotional adult in the room, the child who learned to read faces before reading books, the child who could feel the atmosphere change before anyone even said a word, the child who knew when to be quiet, when to help, when to disappear, when to comfort, when to become useful. And maybe no one ever said this to you, you have to take care of us. But your nervous system understood, your soul understood, your house taught you, the silence taught you, the sadness in your mother's eyes taught you, the anger in your father's voice taught you, the instability, the illness, the conflict, the grief, the addiction, the emotional absence, all of it taught you that love meant responsibility. And this is why later in life you may struggle to rest, you may struggle to receive, you may feel guilty when you choose yourself, if you would ever do that. You may attract people who need saving. You may become the strong one, the helper, the healer, the one who understands everyone. And sometimes people praise you for it. They say, wow, you're so mature, you're so wise, you're so caring, you're so strong. But they don't always see the cost, because sometimes what looks like wisdom began as survival. Sometimes what looks like compassion began as fear, or sometimes what looks like strength began because there was nothing else available. And Bach Flower remedies can be very, very beautiful and powerful here, because they do not just ask, what emotions do you feel today? They really ask, what pattern did you have to become in order to survive? So let's have a look at some remedies for the parentified child. The first one I would recommend to look at is Red Chestnut. Red Chestnut is for the person whose love has become worry. This is the child who was emotionally tied to the safety of others. Maybe you worried about your mother, maybe you worried about your father, your siblings, or maybe you felt that if you did not stay alert, something bad would happen. Boy, do I speak from experience. And now as an adult, you still carry people inside your body. You feel their pain, you anticipate their problems. You just cannot relax until you know everyone is okay. Red Chestnut helps love return to trust. It teaches the soul, I can love you without carrying your destiny. I can care without collapsing into fear. I can be connected without being responsible for everything. The next one we have is oak. So oak is for the one who keeps going, the one who does never complain, the one who says, I'm totally fine, even when they're not fine. The one who holds everything together because they always have. Many parentified children become oak adults. They become reliable, capable, strong, almost impossible to break. But the problem is that oak does not easily know when to stop, because stopping feels dangerous, resting feels selfish, needing help feels weak. Oak helps the person remember that strength is not the same as self-abandonment. It teaches I do not have to earn love through endurance. I do not have to carry what was never mine. I am allowed to rest before I collapse. You have to take care of yourself. You have to take responsibility for yourself too. Then we have Centaury. Centaury is one of the deepest remedies for those who learned to be good by being useful. This is the child who became easy, helpful, adaptable, pleasant, never too much, never difficult. The child who learned to sense what others needed and then became that. And later in life, Centaury may struggle with boundaries. You see why. They say yes when they mean no. They overgive, they help before they are even asked, and they feel guilty when someone is disappointed. But underneath this, there is often a very old fear. If I stop being useful, will I still be loved? Will I still be valued? Centaury helps the will return to the self. It helps you say, my life belongs to me. I can be loving without being available for everyone all the time. I can disappoint someone and still be a good person. Or worse, I can disappoint someone and I will still be loved by them. Then we have alum. Alum is for the moment when the responsible one feels finally overwhelmed. This is especially important for parentified children who became very competent adults. They can manage many things, they can support many people, they can hold many responsibilities, and until one day, they suddenly cannot anymore. And then they think, what is wrong with me? Why can't I handle this anymore? But nothing is wrong. Your system is simply finally saying, this is too much, stop. So alum is not for weakness, alum is for the strong person who has carried just far too much for far too long. It helps restore perspective and it reminds you, I can take one step at a time. I do not have to solve everything today and I am human. Others can also take responsibility. Then we have pine. Pine is for guilt and many parentified children carry so much guilt. They carry guilt like a second skin. Guilt when they rest, guilt when they choose themselves, guilt when they leave, guilt when they stay, guilt when they succeed, guilt when they are happier than the people they came from. Sometimes they even feel guilty for having needs, because somewhere along the way they learned, my needs are a burden. Pine helps release false responsibility. It helps the soul understand, I was a child. It was not my job to save everyone. I'm allowed to have a life that is not built around guilt. Then we have walnut. Walnut is so important when you are breaking with family patterns because healing the parentified child often means crossing an invisible threshold. You may begin to say no, you may stop rescuing, you may stop explaining yourself, you may choose peace over loyalty to dysfunction. And this can feel very uncomfortable because even when a pattern hurts us, it can feel so familiar. And walnut helps protect the new self while it is forming. It helps you stay connected to your own path, even when old family roles try to pull you back in. Walnut says you are allowed to leave the old role, you are allowed to become someone new, you are allowed to become yourself, Yuki. And finally, I would also consider Star of Bethlehem, because parentification is often not one dramatic event. Sometimes it is a very quiet trauma, the trauma of not being seen, the trauma of having to be older than you were, the trauma of emotional loneliness, the trauma of being needed but never held. Star of Bethlehem is the great comforter. It is for the places in us that never received comfort at the time. It helps bring warmth back to the frozen child inside, the child who had to be brave, who had to understand too much, who had to become strong too soon. And this remedy gently says, you do not have to stay alone in that moment anymore. So if you were the parentified child, I want you to hear this. You were not born to be the emotional caretaker of your whole family. You were not born to regulate everyone around you. You were not born to disappear into other people's needs. You were a child. You deserved protection. You deserved softness. You deserved someone who noticed when you were tired. You deserved to be held without having to be useful. And healing does not mean blaming everyone forever, but it does mean telling the truth, because the soul cannot heal from what we keep calling normal. And maybe now your work is not to become stronger. Maybe your work is to become softer, not weak, softer, more honest, more embodied, more connected to your own needs, more willing to let others carry their own life. Because the parentified child often grows into an adult who can hold everyone. But the real healing begins when you ask, who holds me? And perhaps for the first time that answer becomes, I do. If this speaks to you, you can look at remedies like Red Chestnut, Oak, Centaury, Alum, Pine, Walnut, Star of Bethlehem, and of course there's so many more that apply. Agrimony, olive, crabapple, and so on and so forth. Not as a quick fix, but as gentle companions for unraveling the old role. The role of the child who became the parent, the child who became the peacekeeper, the child who became the strong one, and slowly, with awareness, with remedies, and with truth, and with compassion, you can return to the part of you that never had the chance to simply be, to breathe, to play, to receive, to exist without proving your worth. And maybe this is the deepest healing, not becoming someone new, but finally allowing the child inside you to stop working so hard. If you want to learn how to work with Bach Flower Remedies on a deeper and much more personal way, I have a free class link below. And if you recognize yourself in this pattern, tell me in the comments. Were you the one who had to grow up too soon too? I read your comments and I try to answer everyone. And I know many of you will understand this more deeply than words can say. And if you know someone who had to grow up too soon too, someone who became the strong one in their family, please consider sending them this video. Sometimes one person hearing it was never supposed to be your job can bring tremendous relief. And if you want to work with me one-on-one for 90 days, you can do that too. I truly loved making this video. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.